The wind came down off the ridge and cut through the valley like a honed blade. Inside his cabin, Richard Calloway could hear every crack, every seam where the cold slipped through. His breath hung in the air as he fed another stick into the stove. The warmth died before it reached his face.
Furs worth nothing. That's what Frank called them. But they're thick enough to stop a wolf's claws. Maybe they can stop a draft.
Frank Coleman had leaned across his counter 3 weeks ago, a smirk on his well-fed face. $3 a pelt, Calloway. Take it or I'll buy from Thompson. Richard didn't take it. Now, with the temperature dropping, he hauled a beaver pelt from the pile and pressed it against the wall. The first nail bit into wood, and the fur flattened against the planks. A thin cloud of dust rose into the lantern light. He worked until his fingers went numb, covering the north wall, then the south. Each pelt sealed another gap where the winter had been stealing his heat.
The air's gone still. Not warm, but still. That's the trick. Moving air is what kills.
Outside, the wind sharpened its edge, searching for a way in. But for the first time all winter, Richard's cabin felt like a shelter, not a sieve.
Sleeping in my own unsold stock. Let them laugh. When this storm hits, those pelts will be worth more than any coin.
By afternoon, he had covered the east wall in a patchwork of beaver and fox. The stove still struggled, but the room held its breath.
Another layer on the west wall, and maybe the drafts will stop fighting me for every degree.
From the trail outside, a muffled voice cut through the snow-heavy air. Calloway, sleeping in his own unsold stock.
Laugh while you can. Your cabin will be an icebox by morning.
He ignored the voice and stretched a thick wolfskin across the last bare section. The hammer fell with steady rhythm.
That's it. The wind's got nowhere to go now.
He stood back. The wall looked like the inside of a den. Dark, muffled, sealed tight.
I can feel the difference. The cold is still out there, but it isn't moving through me anymore.
The fire dropped to coals, but near the firs the air stayed bearable. A quiet settled. He had 2 walls left. Outside, the sky pressed gray, temperature still falling. The cold front rolled in before midnight. By morning, the valley was locked in a deep freeze. The thermometer outside the trading post read -40. Even the pine trees cracked in the cold. Inside, Richard finished the last wall. He nailed the final pelt with fingers so numb they bled. He stood there, surrounded by fur. The cabin looked like the den of some great animal. He built up the fire, but it didn't need to roar. The firs held the heat close.
It's not warm, but it's alive. The air doesn't bite anymore.
He pressed his face against the fur. He could hear the wind howling, but it was distant, muffled. There was no whistle through the chinking, no icy fingers reaching through the logs.
This is what a beaver knows. Still air inside a den. The world can freeze, but the den stays safe.
For the first time all winter, Richard Calloway slept without shivering. The next morning, a knock came at the door. Richard opened it to find Eric Hansen, his neighbor, white with frost.
Heard your cabin's the warmest in the valley. Figured you'd found a way to cheat winter.
Richard stepped aside, letting him in. Eric stopped just inside, mouth open.
Lord, Richard, it's like walking into a den. How?
Furs on the walls, still air. No draft. That's the secret.
Eric touched the nearest pelt, shaking his head. He'd sold all his best furs to Frank.
My place is a sieve. I can hear the wind screaming through the chinking.
Then you'd better find something to stop it. This cold will kill a man in hours.
Eric looked at the fur walls, then back toward the door, a new fear settling behind his eyes. He left without another word, stepping into the whiteout. The storm was not finished. The cold snap held for 3 more days. Richard's woodpile shrank to a few armfuls, but his cabin stayed bearable.
I used to burn twice this much. The furs are doing half the work.
Across the valley, Eric Hansen couldn't say the same. His cabin groaned under the weight of the cold.
The fire's nothing but embers. I can see my breath crystallize.
He thought of Richard's den-like warmth, the thick pelts sealing the walls. He'd called it foolish once.
Should have kept those marten skins. Sold them for pennies to Frank.
He piled all his blankets onto the bed and still shook through the night.
Richard said still air was the secret. My walls are screaming.
He knew where help was, 100 yards through the blizzard, but pride held him fast.
Maybe tomorrow it'll break. Maybe I can hold out one more night.
4 days of this freeze, and Richard couldn't shake the image of Eric's gaunt face. He'd seen that look on men who didn't last.
He's too stubborn to ask for help, but this cold doesn't care about pride.
He pulled on his heaviest coat, lit a lantern, and opened the door into the howling white. The storm shoved him sideways, but he braced and pushed on, one hand shielding his eyes from the needles of ice. Eric's cabin loomed dark. The door was frozen solid, ice sealing every crack. He drove his shoulder against it until the ice shattered and the wood splintered open. Inside, the air stabbed. Eric lay crumpled near the stove, barely breathing.
Tried to wait it out. Didn't want to trouble you.
Trouble? You are half dead. We're leaving now.
He pulled Eric upright and wrapped a wolf pelt from his own shoulders around him. They had to move, or the storm would bury them. They stumbled into the blinding white. Richard locked his arm around Eric's waist and pulled him forward step by step.
That pelt. You'll freeze without it. I am not worth both of us.
My walls can be rebuilt. You can't. Now move.
The wind screamed louder, a living thing trying to shove them back. Each yard gained was a battle. Eric's legs gave out twice. Richard hauled him up both times, growling against the cold. Then, through the dizzying swirl, a faint amber glow pulsed, Richard's cabin light.
There, just a little further. Don't you dare quit now.
He half-carried, half-dragged Eric the last 50 yards, boots punching through crusted drifts. Eric's head lolled. His shivering had nearly stopped, a bad sign. They reached the door. Richard's frozen hand couldn't grip the latch. He shouldered it open. They spilled inside, snow swirling. Richard dragged Eric to the stove and fed the dying coals until flame caught. He stripped off his own coat and laid it over Eric, then ripped 2 pelts from the nearest wall and piled them on.
Come on, Eric. Breathe. Fight for it.
Then he felt it, a thin knife of cold sliding from the bare patch where the wolf pelt had hung.
That gap will drain every bit of warmth we have. It has to be sealed.
He grabbed a beaver pelt and hammered it into place, then stuffed rags and moss into the remaining cracks. His fingers were clumsy with cold, but he worked without pause, sealing layer over layer until the draft died. At last, he pressed his palm to the wall. Nothing moved. The cold was locked outside again.
The wall's solid. Now all we need is for him to fight.
He sank down beside Eric, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Outside, the blizzard howled. Inside, the air was still. He did not sleep. Through the long dark, Richard fed the fire and watched Eric's face for any change.
The furs didn't just keep me warm. They gave me a way to bring him back.
Eric, shivering, returned, weak at first, then stronger, a sign his body was still fighting. Richard checked Eric's fingers and toes, rubbing them gently to restore the blood. Frostbite had bitten deep.
Don't lose them now. Don't leave me as the man who watched you freeze.
The storm screamed against the walls, but the furs ate the noise. Inside, there was only the crackle of the fire. Sometime in the deep cold of early morning, Eric's eyes fluttered open.
Richard.
Stay still. You are safe. Rest now.
By dawn, the wind had died. Pale light crept through the frost. Eric breathed deep and even. Over the following days, Eric slowly returned. He sat wrapped in furs, sipping broth, while Richard watched the color seep back into his face.
I owe you my life. That wolf pelt you put around me. It was the difference.
Those furs weren't meant to be sold. They were meant for this, keeping a man alive.
I was wrong. I thought you were foolish, sleeping in your unsold stock. But your walls are a fortress.
Richard glanced at the patched section of wall where the wolf pelt had hung, a scar that proved something.
If one wall could save him, then every cabin in this valley could be made safe.
The storm had broken, leaving a world buried in white, but inside, a new resolve kindled.
What about the others? Folks who sold to Frank and now have bare walls.
Then we teach them, show them how to build a den.
And for the first time, Richard saw the furs not as a lost sale, but as a gift he could pass on. News travels fast through a mountain valley. Within days, the story of Eric's rescue reached every cabin. A trapper knocked on Richard's door, asking to see the walls for himself.
Come in, feel the walls, no draft.
He pressed his palm to the fur, then to the bare section. Richard hadn't yet rehung. The difference was stark.
It's not about heat. It's about stopping the wind. The body fights the cold, but moving air kills.
He's right. I am alive because of these walls.
The trapper left, and soon others came. Each one left with a new idea about their own bare walls. At the trading post, Frank Coleman heard the murmurs and laughed behind his counter.
Furs on walls? Nonsense. They're for coats, not decoration. Calloway's lost his mind.
But the rumors didn't stop. The valley was starting to listen to a different voice. A week later, Eric's strength had returned. He joined Richard not as a patient, but as a partner, in a neighbor's drafty cabin. They hammered pelts to the walls, explaining the principle as they worked. The neighbor stared at the wall, then muttered, "Never thought I'd keep my furs for walls."
Still air, no draft. That's all it takes.
By the time they finished, the cabin already felt like a different place. Soon, others asked for the same. The valley's mockery turned to curiosity, then to respect.
They're not laughing now, they're listening.
That night, Richard sat in his own fur-lined cabin, a sense of purpose settling over him.
We're not just two men anymore. We're a lesson.
But at the trading post, Frank Coleman scowled at the empty fur racks. The rumors were no longer amusing. Frank went door to door raising his offers, but every trapper shook their head.
Disaster. No one will sell. That fool Calloway has poisoned the well.
He stormed to Richard's cabin and pounded on the door, forcing it open.
You are costing me business, Calloway. Every trapper in the valley is nailing pelts to his walls.
I am not costing you anything. The winter is. It's teaching us what matters.
Then no one will buy your furs next season either. I'll see to that.
Then I'll keep them on my walls. Warmth isn't something you can buy from me.
Frank stormed out, his threat swallowed by the empty racks of his warehouse.
This isn't over. I'll break him if it's the last thing I do.
But the valley was no longer listening to Frank. It had learned a quieter voice. The harder Frank pushed, the tighter the valley held its pelts. Every morning he counted new cabins with fur-lined windows. He cornered one trapper outside the trading post, waving a fresh roll of bills. The trapper didn't even glance at the money. He just said the words Frank had begun to dread. "I need my furs more than your money. The cold is still out there." Frank's warehouse stayed silent. Pelts that should have been stacked to the rafters were now warming half the valley.
Every night I wait, and the shelves stay bare. That mountain rat has taken everything.
At dusk, he walked the valley and saw the glow of a dozen fur-lined cabins against the snow.
Calloway did this. That fool in his fur den turned my market into a nursery.
But no amount of money could buy what the valley had learned to build. The furs were staying on the walls. A week later, they came to the poorest cabin, where frost glazed the inside walls and children slept in their coats.
Anyone with furs can do this. It's not complicated. Just keep the wind from moving.
It's not just about selling. It's about keeping your family alive.
The mother touched the fur with a trembling hand, then pulled her children closer to the wall. From the ridge, Frank Coleman watched another cabin glow warm. He didn't move, didn't speak.
I was wrong about you, Richard. And I was wrong about those furs.
They were never meant to be sold. Just took a bad winter to teach us.
Frank returned to his empty warehouse and stared at the bare shelves. Fall had been a buyer's market. Winter had changed the rules.
Calloway didn't just cheat me out of pelts. He turned the whole valley into his den.
But the families didn't care about markets. They cared about the silence that now filled their walls. At dusk, Frank came again. But this time, not with threats. He held a leather pouch fat with banknotes.
Name your price, Calloway. I'll pay double what they're worth. Triple. Just let me take them to market.
Richard looked at the pouch, then at the fur walls behind him. The same walls that had kept him alive.
They're not for sale. They're for survival.
Don't be a fool. This is more money than you've ever seen. You can buy new furs next season.
Next season, I might need them on my walls again. This isn't a market, Frank. It's a den.
Frank's hand trembled on the pouch. The smugness that had lined his face all fall was gone.
Even now he won't bend. These walls are worth more to him than my entire business.
He turned without another word and trudged back into the snow, the pouch heavy and useless. Richard watched him go, then shut the door. The silence of the firs returned, deeper than before. Within a fortnight, word of the fur-walled cabins spread beyond the valley. Trappers in distant ranges were nailing their pelts to their walls. At the trading post, a crumpled notice was pinned to the board. Fur shortage. Paying triple for prime pelts. No one answered it.
All those years of lowballing, and now no one will sell me a single pelt.
He went to the last trapper he knew, a young man who had once begged for a fair price. Now he wouldn't even open the door.
The whole valley's gone mad. They'd rather hang fur on their walls than take my money.
In the trading post, the other trappers talked of nothing else. Fur-lined homes had become the new standard. Frank Coleman took the last of his savings and closed his doors. The sign read, "Closed."
Should have bought them when I had the chance. Now I am the one with nothing.
The fur market had inverted. What was once a commodity was now a necessity. No price could compete with survival, and in the high valley, not a single draft-ridden cabin remained. On a clear evening, the valley gathered in the old barn. They came not to trade, but to listen.
They asked me to talk about furs, but it's not about the furs. It's about sealing the cracks where the wind steals your life. Still air, no draft. That's the whole secret.
Sleeping in his own unsold stock. Smartest thing he ever did.
The room erupted in laughter and applause. Feet stomped the wooden floor.
All this from a pile of furs no one wanted. They kept me alive, and now they've kept the valley alive.
Eric walked up and clasped his shoulder.
You gave them more than insulation, Richard. You gave them a way to fight back.
The gathering lasted late. For once, the talk wasn't of prices or shortages, but of warmth.
The winter never reached me. Not really. It only ever reached the cracks I let stay open.
As winter deepened, the valley became a patchwork of fur-lined cabins, each window glowing warm. By the end of the season, not a single draft-ridden cabin remained in the high valley. Inside his own den, Richard Calloway watched the snow fall past the window.
-40 outside, but inside the fur walls stand guard.
And so it was. Furs on every wall, and the -40 winter never reached him. Eric sat beside him, a cup of coffee in hand. His frostbite faded to scars.
Think it'll ever get that cold again?
The cold will always come, but now we know how to meet it.
Outside, the wind searched for a way in, but the furs gave it none.
This is what a den is. Not just shelter, stillness.
A week later, a wagon rolled down the valley road, loaded with crates. Frank Coleman sat hunched, his fine coat dusted with snow.
Should have bought them when I had the chance. Now I am the one with nothing.
He didn't look back again. The valley that had once fed his pockets now held only silence. Inside his cabin, Richard heard the wagon pass but didn't go to the window.
It was never about the money. It was about holding on to what the winter tried to take.
He thought of the pelts that had once been worth pennies, now priceless against the cold.
They laughed when I nailed them up, called me a fool. But in the end, the furs kept the valley alive.
Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, the air stood still, a quiet monument to a trapper who had trusted his own hands. And the valley remembered, not the man who bought low and sold high, but the one who taught them how to build a den. The furs were still on the walls, and they would stay. As the season turned, the furs remained. Spring light filtered through the frosty window, warm and diffused. Richard and Eric sat across from each other, coffee steaming between them. No words needed.
I never knew silence could be this loud.
It's not silence, it's air that stands still. The wind can't move through the fur.
Funny. I used to hate the howl of the wind. Now I miss it because I can't hear it.
You are hearing something better. You are hearing a home that doesn't fight the cold.
They sat in the quiet, two men who had faced down the mountain's worst and found shelter in pelts meant to be sold. Outside, a light breeze stirred the pines, but inside, not a single draft moved.
I'll never sell a pelt again. They'll stay on my walls forever.
And in that moment, the winter was truly behind them. Richard rose from his chair, the coffee long cold. The fire had burned low, but the furs held the warmth. He walked to the window and rested his hand on the layered pelts. They were still, like the breath of the cabin itself. Outside, the frozen world stretched white and silent. The storm had passed, leaving only stillness. The winter had roared, but within these walls, it had found no purchase. And so, in a cabin lined with the furs he could not sell, Richard Calloway did what no blizzard could undo. He built a place where the wind stopped searching.
Still air. No draft.
The furs remained on the walls, and the valley slept safe beneath its blanket of snow. And the -40 winter never reached him. Fade to black,